Top of the morning to you and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines: Russia says attacks Ukrainian command post, while Ukraine claims it intercepts Russian air targets. Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he'd warned Russian President Vladimir Putin against conflict with Ukraine. Plus, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the United States is waging war against Russia. Thank you for joining us. Russia said its forces attacked Ukrainian command posts while Ukraine claimed it intercepted Russian air targets. According to a battle report released by the Russian Defense Ministry, Russian forces repelled Ukrainian offensives in Zaporizhia, in southeastern Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk in the eastern part of the country and other directions, neutralizing many military personnel and equipment, including a M2 infantry fighting vehicle. The ministry also claims that the Russian air defense system had intercepted several aerial bombs and anti-radar missiles from the Ukrainian side. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine claims that over the past 24 hours, dozens of battles took place in Bakhmut and Marinka in eastern Ukraine, saying that Ukrainian forces carried out airstrikes on Russian personnel and equipment positions and hit a Russian air defense missile system, ammunition depot, and electronic warfare systems. The Ukrainian Air Defense Force also intercepted many Russian air targets. The general in command of Ukraine's ground forces says that Ukrainian forces had recaptured the eastern village of Klishchivka on the southern flank of Bakhmut, which the Russians claimed control of back in January. In a telegram post, Alexander Syrsky, commander of Ukraine's ground forces, says the area was cleared of the Russians and liberated, accompanied by a video showing soldiers holding flags in front of destroyed buildings. The Ukrainian military said that Kiev's troops achieved success in the Klishchivka district of the Donetsk region, forcing the enemy out of their positions. Ukrainian military analyst says this week the liberation of settlements near Bakhmut would allow the military to advance from the southern flank in the Bakhmut area, gaining control of the heights. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky commends soldiers for recapturing the eastern village of Klishchivka. Mr. Zelensky was quoted as saying, in his words, "Today, I would like to particularly commend the soldiers who, step by step, are returning to Ukraine what belongs to it, namely in the area of Bakhmut, 80th Airborne Assault Brigade, 5th Separate Assault Brigade, Glorious 95th and Joint Assault Brigade of the National Police, Klishchivka, well done." Now, Klishchivka is around 6 miles south of Bakhmut and had a pre-war population of around 400 people. It's several miles north of Andrivka, which was recaptured earlier this week. Both settlements were substantially destroyed in the months of fighting for Bakhmut. White House National Security Advisor Mr. Jake Sullivan says the United States expects to announce additional aid to Ukraine, while announcing that U.S. President Joe Biden will host Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday, September the 21st, at the White House. Now, Mr. Sullivan says the Ukrainian president is expected to meet with congressional leaders from both political parties while he is in Washington.
President Biden will then return to Washington to host President Zelensky of Ukraine here at the White House on Thursday. And this will be their third meeting here at the White House, and it certainly comes at a critical time, as Russia desperately seeks help from countries like North Korea for its brutal war in Ukraine, as Ukrainian forces continue to make progress in their counteroffensive, and just after the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting that Secretary Austin is organizing with dozens of our allies and partners in Europe earlier next week, as we continue to coordinate the provision of arms and equipment to help Ukrainian forces. We are always preparing a new military package for Ukraine. As you know, we do these presidential drawdown packages essentially every couple of weeks, and I think you can anticipate that there will be a further announcement of additional resources and capabilities, additional weapons to go to Ukraine as they continue this counteroffensive and to defend against Russian attacks at some point next week. And I think he's looking forward to the opportunity not just to see President Biden here at the White House, but also to see congressional leaders from both parties to make the case that the United States has been a great friend and partner to Ukraine throughout this entire brutal war, and that the United States should continue to do that. We have confidence that there will be bipartisan support for this. I think President Zelensky does as well, and he wants to build momentum towards that as we head to the end of the month.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump has come out to say he'd warned Russian President Vladimir Putin against conflict with Ukraine. Speaking to the conservative Concerned Women for America group, Mr. Trump says he had said Russia's invasion of Ukraine would not have happened if he remained in power.
But The Apprentice was great. But he said, you fired, and I fired a lot of people, but we're going to have to fire a lot more because that deep state runs deeper than we thought. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after I win the presidency, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled, and it would have never happened. It would have never, ever happened if I was there. I used to talk to Putin about it. I've said it very openly. I talked to him about it. It was the apple of his eye. I said, don't do it, Vladimir. Don't do it, Vladimir. Oh, you'll be making such a mistake. And I told him a couple of things. He said, you wouldn't do that. I said, yes, I will. No, you wouldn't. And he probably didn't believe me, but he believed me 10%. That's all you needed. But I said, don't do it. As soon as I left, they started to form. And the most embarrassing moment in the history.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused the United States of waging war against Russia through its support for Ukraine. When asked to comment on reports that the U.S. may provide Ukraine with missiles with longer ranges, Mr. Lavrov said in his words, the United States is waging a war against Russia by attempting to control the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and by providing Ukraine with weapons, ammunition, intelligence, information, and data from satellites. Mr. Lavrov suggested that rumors about Washington possibly giving the green light to the delivery of Army tactical missile systems, which have a range of up to 300 kilometers, were aimed at shaping public opinion. Also, according to the minister, these deliberations will not change the fact that for many years Ukraine has been groomed to fight with its hands and bodies in order to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. Now let's talk to Senior Fellow, Forum of Transregional Studies, Senior Researcher, National Academy of Science, Ukraine, Victoria Sereda, who is in Berlin at the moment. Good morning and Laskavo Prosimo.
Morning. Morning.
Let's begin with the visit of the Ukrainian president to the United States. So he can kill two birds with one stone. The UN General Assembly is happening. He can make a further case for Ukraine, and he's also due to meet US President Joe Biden. Are you confident that in the first place, the UN General Assembly will help further the cause for Ukraine? And in the second case, that the aid from the United States will continue as he meets President Biden?
I think we should look a little bit broadly because I think there are many very important discussions to be held during the UN General Assembly during this year. First of all, we are still facing a very big issue with grain deal, which is not yet resolved. Yesterday, the first vessel came to Ukrainian port, but this night, Ukrainian ports were attacked by Russian missiles again. We also see the situation with Ukrainian Western neighbors from EU. Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia are protesting against delivering this grain via their countries. So I guess this would be a very important issue to discuss at the General Assembly. But what we also see in news that probably Biden will try to discuss the possibility to change the Security Council. His proposition would be to add new countries to the Security Council, such as India, Brazil, SAR, Germany, and Japan. We don't know what will be happening, whether any reform will be going forward or will be blocked. But I think that there will be very many new discussions happening during this General Assembly meeting. I also think that this is important for Zelensky to talk to U.S. Congress, to both parties, because as right now we see there are a lot of issues with presidential presidential campaign in U.S. On the one side, we have a candidate who is facing 90 charges. And on the other side, there is also possibility that another candidate might be impeached. At least some processes has been started in the Congress. So in this case, I think it's very important for Zelensky to talk to both sides and to get some support from both sides of U.S. Voting electorate.
The side, the candidate who is facing 90 charges, as you reminded us, obviously is President Donald Trump, who has 4 indictments against him. He has to cross that hurdle, and there are other issues concerning whether the trial will take place at the same time as the elections and what have you. You just heard him. We played we reported him saying that he warned the president of Russia, that he warned President Putin against attacking Ukraine. He said, "Don't do it, Vladimir. Don't do it, Vladimir." Will a Trump presidency favor Ukraine?
I think the problem is that it's not only Trump, but probably a lot of global leaders warned Vladimir Putin against attacking Ukraine. And we remember that there were a lot of diplomatic issues and attempts made in January before Ukraine was attacked. So, but what we see that Putin didn't listen to anybody. He made those decisions by himself, and even after the beginning of full-scale aggression, again, there were a lot of leaders talking to Putin, trying to bring his 2 senses, but nothing changed. So I do not think that it's so simple that the president of country X can call to president of Russia and say, "Hey, stop the war," or "Let's do something about that." Of course, it would be very difficult for Ukraine to fight if U.S. completely suspends the military support.
Let me rephrase the question. Do you see President Donald Trump as a friend of Ukraine?
I don't see him as a friend of Ukraine. We remember, and I remember being in US exactly during the previous cycle of elections. And I remember that Ukraine was, again, even that time used as a playing card during the elections and post the elections. When you switch your TV almost 24/7, there were discussions and some media coverage saying that Ukraine corrupt, Biden, Ukraine corrupt. So I don't think that this looks as a friendly attitude towards certain country if you just simply use this country to play a card in your election campaign.
Wasn't it Donald Trump that pointed out the dependence of Germany on the pipelines from Russia? And what he did was not in the interest of Russia, it was in the interest of Europe. And he pointed that out. And so what do you make of that particular instance? I know it's often touted that he is not a friend of Ukraine, he's pro-Russian and a friend of Putin. But what do you make of that instance? And also, he seemed to be on very good terms with President Zelensky when he was in office.
I think that President Zelensky tries to be open to any government which is in the office, because this is important for Ukraine and for Ukrainian politics. It would be very difficult to survive against Russia without support from US or our Western partners. But at the same time, what we see that, for example, when Putin attacked Ukraine, a certain much stronger interconnectedness between US and Western allies was built, and much more understanding. And also there were a lot of quarrels and discussions within the EU, which are right now not so much visible. So I think what President Trump was doing, yes, he was criticizing, but he also was very much playing on different cleavages within the Europe.
Right. At this point of the counteroffensive, would you say that Ukraine is making the progress that it needs to make?
No, we cannot say so. The progress is extremely slow, but it also very much depended on the military support which Ukraine received at very late stage and is still receiving with some delays. Right now, for example, the latest news is that Ukraine is using the supply for artillery much faster than Europe can produce and support Ukraine. So again, certain progress is achieved, but then Ukraine has waited for the supply to arrive. And we should remember that there's only a few weeks left before heavy rains and autumn will start. And then it's almost impossible to do intensive progress with heavy weapons in this part of the country because of black soil.
Tell us how the weather is at this time of the year. The autumn is almost upon us, as you've mentioned. Tell us how severe it can get.
So far, it's very summer type of the weather, and everybody says that this summer is one of the hottest in the globe, and especially in Europe. But of course, as soon as it becomes cold and rainy, the situation will radically change. And we also know that, Ukrainian citizens are already warned that, first of all, there will be electricity cuts, and that Russia collected certain supply of missiles, that we should expect another wave of infrastructure being hit with the beginning of the autumn.
You're in Berlin, in Germany, which is far removed from the scene. What are you hearing from the Ukrainian community where you are in Germany about the state of the war?
So on the one side, there are attempts to normalize life as it is. For example, in majority of schools and educational institutions, right now we have offline presence. But everybody is warned that this is only till the time if, again, the electricity grid will be hit, and if there will be no electricity heating and running water in the cities during the autumn or winter, then everything will again has to be paused till the spring, or at least function online if it's possible. So people are preparing themselves for another very difficult autumn and winter. And people are also expecting some progress of Ukrainian offense, but understanding, and we already see a lot of comments saying that this war won't end by the end of the year, definitely that it will be again a protracted conflict, at least till the next year, and nobody knows how much longer.
Indeed, that's the gray area for all of us. We don't know how much longer this war will continue. And as it does continue, the consequences remain far-flung. For instance, we're talking now about the humanitarian concern and the displacement of Ukrainians across Europe because of this war. Concerning the educational system and Russia indoctrinating its own youth concerning the Ukrainian war, teaching them in the schools, in the high schools, their perspective of history for the Ukrainian war. What is your concern? Will the Ukrainians as well teach their own children their own perspective of history about the Ukrainian and Russia war?
So far, we do not see any changes in the textbooks in Ukrainian schooling system. Until now, the system was that actually there was a variety of choice, and schools could choose which history, for example, textbooks they will be using this year. So we do not have one history textbook for all schools or all children in our country. And this is up to the teachers and experts which textbook they will be using. And I haven't heard yet voices that we have to have one single way of teaching history. However, what our Ministry of Education is doing at the moment, that those kids who are outside of the country and they continue to stay there for already some of them 2 years and probably the next year, if they want to receive the certificate from Ukrainian educational system, they should take online 3 courses: Ukrainian language, Ukrainian literature, and Ukrainian history, because these 3 subjects definitely are not taught in those schools whenever they are staying outside of the country.
Now, support for Ukraine across the world is palpable. Many countries support Ukraine. Many countries think that this invasion of Ukraine by Russia is an evil that needs to be remedied. Now, talking some more about the humanitarian concerns and the consequences of this war, do you see a shift in the European context of where Ukraine is placed alongside Russia after the demise of the USSR? Is Ukraine now more a European country and wants to be identified as such than as a former USSR region?
There are a lot of discussions within the academic community that understanding of the regions should be reconsidered, because in majority of cases, whenever someone was talking about Eastern Europe or Soviet Union, they meant mostly Russia. And in many universities across the world, if Eastern European studies were present, then they would be focusing on Russia. And now discussion is that Ukraine's case is showing that much more attention should be paid to other parts of the region. And it's not only Ukraine, because Ukraine is not a single country. And in this sense, the much more understanding of diversity of within the region should be gained, and also a new approaches, because even if you look at Ukraine, Ukraine is extremely diverse ethnically, religiously, linguistically, and so on. So if we look at the region, we have to look at region's diversity and not through Russia, but through experiences of other parts of the region. And I think this gradually changes. Similarly, when for example, the victory over Nazism is discussed, quite often this was a sign of equivalence between victory and Russia. And now much more discussions are made, and it's looked through the lens of many other Soviet republics which contributed to this, and whose contribution was forgotten. And it's not only Ukraine. We have to talk about Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and all other republics, or all other independent countries in the region. For example, even right now, what we are seeing, that one of the closest allies of Russia, Armenia, is changing its political direction.
Right. History has been made right before our eyes, and we hope that we're on the right side of history at the end of the day. And we thank you for being with us. Diakuyu, Victoria Sarida, the program coordinator, Institute for Advanced Studies, who joined us from Berlin. Many thanks.
Дякую. Have a good day.
You too. After the break, China's top diplomat Wang Yi to discuss the war in Ukraine with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov as he begins visit to Russia. Welcome back to the sophomore stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un left the railway station in Russia's far eastern city of Artyom on board a train bound for home. Video from a Russian news agency on Sunday showed the Russian Natural Resources Minister Alexander Kozlov, Moscow's ambassador to North Korea, Alexander Matsygora, and governor of Russia's far eastern Primorsky region, Oleg Koshymyanko, seeing off the North Korean leader at the end of his week-long visit. The North Korean leader can be seen walking along a red carpet to his train carriage in the Russian far eastern city of Artyom and waving goodbye to the sounds of a military band. The distance from Artyom to the Kasan station on Russia's border with North Korea is over 200 kilometers. In the meantime, China's top diplomat Wang Yi is expected to discuss the war in Ukraine with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov as he begins a visit to Russia. According to a statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Mr. Wang will visit Russia from September the 18th to the 21st. Statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry says the Chinese Foreign Minister is expected to meet Lavrov to discuss a wide range of bilateral cooperation issues, which include detailed exchange of views on issues related to a settlement in Ukraine. The scheduled meeting comes on the heels of a closely watched summit between Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which the United States has warned could lead to Pyongyang supplying Moscow with munitions for its war in Ukraine. Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary announced their own restrictions on Ukrainian grain imports last week after the European Commission decided not to extend its ban on imports into Ukraine's 5 EU neighbors. The EU Trade Commissioner said countries should refrain from unilateral measures against imports of Ukrainian grain, but Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary immediately responded by reimposing their own restrictions on Ukrainian grain imports. They will continue to allow the transit of Ukrainian produce. Poland's agricultural minister says the ban will include 4 cereal and meals from corn, wheat, and rapeseed. Meanwhile, Hungary imposed a national import ban on 24 Ukrainian agricultural products, including grain, vegetable, several meat products, and honey. Slovakia's agriculture minister followed suit, announcing its own grain ban. Now let's talk to Dr. Dakwa Thomas, expert on international relations theory, Lagos State University, and a founding member of the AFRPN, that's the Association of Foreign Relations Professionals of Nigeria, joining us virtually from Lagos here, southwest Nigeria. You're welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning, Olumide.
It must be bittersweet for the Ukrainians that though they have this support from the EU, the countries that we just mentioned, such as Poland and Hungary, have to think of number one, themselves and their farmers and their agricultural economy so as to keep the ban going so that their people can have leeway. What's your impression of the difficult decision that these countries had to make?
Well, sometimes in a war like in a war situation or war scenario like this, you have to take some very difficult actions. And I want to believe that it's unfortunate that it is happening, but it is this is supported theoretically in international relations or international politics. Once there is a conflict between your own domestic interest or national interest and the national interest of another state, irrespective of the relationship or irrespective of the situation or condition that country is going through, your own domestic interest or national interest will have to prevail. So you do not expect Hungary, Poland, and some of the other countries that have imposed ban on Ukraine grain. You don't expect them to let their own farmers keep suffering as a result of being sympathetic towards Ukraine in the war. So they have to take care of their own farmers, and the only way to do that is to place a ban on Ukraine grain. And I think it's unfortunate, but sometimes some of these painful decisions have to be taken in some circumstances like this, in situations like this.
Indeed, one sees how important and how powerful Ukraine is and will be as a country if just their grain alone is causing these sorts of problems across the world, the supply of their grain and withholding of that supply. But now to the United Nations General Assembly taking place in New York. Is this a golden opportunity for anything else to be done in your view, or will it be more of the same, of a stalemate where the United Nations can't bring anything to the table for this war for mediation, for this war to come to a conclusion?
Based on what is trending, what is going on now among the countries involved, US, North Korea now, China, and Russia, I do not see any kind of peaceful initiative, or I do not see an end to the war as anytime soon, because it's like every one of them is mobilizing towards an escalation of the war, and it has to be preempted. I mean, for purpose of preempting what actions the three. I mean, I'm talking about Russia now, Russia, China, and North Korea. You know, this reminds me of the scenario of the Korean War of 1950-53, July 25th, when these communists, Russia, Soviet Union then, and China and North Korea invaded South Korea. So the scenario unfolding is similar to what happened in 1950. And I think we have to be very careful. And that is why every opportunity that Zelensky has, he feels he must continue to trumpet it to the United Nations that this is dangerous. It is dangerous in the sense that he can see an escalation taking place, and a victory for Putin will definitely signal the end of, if possibly, United Nations itself, because its Article 2, subsection 4 is very, very clear. You don't even threaten. You don't threaten another sovereign nation, and then, let alone you want to use force. It is not allowed. So it's violating everything. Then there are sanctions against North Korea. Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council. Here is a permanent member of the Security Council violating the sanctions, engaging 6 days for that matter, 6 days, engaging in war tourism with North Korea. And then they are saying that they can engage in bilateral economic and political relationship with North Korea. Now, what happens to the sanctions imposed by United Nations against North Korea? Russia is it's not complying. So you can see that the tendency for an escalatory situation has been built or is being built by Russia. And as such, the United Nations, any condemnation by United Nations now, particularly the General Assembly for that matter, will definitely go a long way to also have a kind of psychological impact on what is going on. And then the war becomes more conscious of the evil that Russia protects for peace, for global peace. So I think it's in the right frame of situation when Zelensky decides to now address physically the United Nations General Assembly.
But condemnation can only go so far. There's nothing, it appears, the United Nations General Assembly will say now that it hasn't said before, except there's something new. Our other guests talked about hearing about possible propositions for more members to be included in the Security Council. Maybe that will help to a certain degree. But for any sort of decision to be made that will hold Russia accountable, if they are to be held accountable, or hold North Korea accountable, if they are also to be held accountable, can anything be done? Or is the United Nations, just as some people have said, a toothless bulldog and just a moral voice to provide a moral compass, to provide a moral high ground and moral discussions, but nothing tangible in the way of moral action?
Well, this is the time that the United Nations General Assembly has to make itself very active and very viable and effective, because I know very well that a call for the suspension of Russia or the suspension of veto power cannot come from the Security Council, because for as long as that veto persists within the Security Council, then it will be vetoed right there. However, the United Nations General Assembly cannot continue to be a toothless bulldog. It must be active. It must be active in a situation where this kind of confusion or conflict is going on. So a proposal can be made, to the effect that, look, there is, if Russia fails, there is nothing so sacrosanct about the sanctions imposed by United Nations on North Korea. Then there should be nothing sacrosanct in the veto power. In any case, there is nothing sacrosanct in the veto power. I keep saying nothing. They just decided to use it. To allot veto power to themselves. The 5 permanent members. Yeah. And as such, there is nothing so sacrosanct about it, or the suspension of it. So, yes, psychologically, you are saying that possibly nothing will happen if it is just about condemnation. Yes, but don't forget there is a psychological dimension to warfare. It is not just about military action. Zelensky knows where to play politics of psychology, psychological warfare. And then where he is going to get the ammunition. He knows that EU, NATO, and the United States are the people that are going to make provision for the ammunition. So he knows where to get his ammunition, but he's all just doing a kind of psychological warfare with Russia. That's why he keeps talking about condemnation. You can see that even despite the fact that he was not invited to G20 meeting, he was still saying that the communication was of fear, because he believes that every opportunity to condemn Russia's action definitely will have some psychological impact. People may not see the impact of psychology, but definitely knows that there is something called psychological warfare. Psychology to warfare. And that's exactly what he's doing.
Finally, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, says that this is just a proxy war. The United States is just fighting Russia through Ukraine. The United States has no intention of peace in this matter. It just wants to use Ukraine as a linchpin to get at Russia. And we've heard this consternation from other nations across the world as well. What's your final position on whether the great influence of the United States is being rightly or wrongly brought to bear in this conflict?
Well, I've made a difference between proxy war in a paper I just wrote, in an academic paper I just wrote. I've made a difference or a distinction between what is called proxy war and errant war. Putin made it so clear from the beginning, particularly when he was admitting the 4 regions, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia, when he was admitting them into Russia's country. He was admitting them as part of Russia. He said that he wanted the Kyiv authorities to tell their masters. So that's an errant war. He's sending them message. He knows from the beginning that, well, proxy war is not, proxy war is a war that you fight, and then you will not even see the people that are behind the war, that are supplying the arms. But in this situation, it's an errant war because, number one, they are even making the supply open. The supply is open. The inventorization is open. So everything is being done in the open. That's an errand war. And they know that the Russians are seeing them. The Russians know that they are the people supplying and everything. However, one critical point that I feel should make US to be actively and militarily involved in this war is this. 1867, the United States, through the Secretary of State, with Seward, they call it Seward Foley. He bought Alaska. Alaska is in US now, but Alaska used to be part of Russia. So he bought Alaska with 7.2 million, the whole of Alaska with 7.2 million. That is at the rate of 2%. 2 pence or what? 2
cents.
Less than $2.
2 cents.
Yes. You understand? Less than $2. He bought an acre. He bought an acre for 2 cents. 2 cents. He bought an acre for 2 cents. So he bought the whole of Alaska for 7.2 million. Good. Now, Alaska belongs to US and the US has taken control. Good. But the trend now is that for every intervention that Putin is making, is always using the excuse of protecting the Russians in the territory. This is what he did in Georgia when he went to Abkhazia and South Ossetia. He said he is protecting the Russians there. So he has almost 25% of Georgia now. And then he also went to Finland. He had Finland. He had 9% of Finland. He's also in Moldova, where he's taking part, where he has his Transnistria. So a situation may arise one day where Putin will now say he wants to protect the Russians in Alaska. Because don't forget, there were native Russians in Alaska as at the time that Seward bought the place in 1867. So the Americans now have to be very, very careful because the excuse may come again. Because this is a man who believes that kind of thing, forgetting that this is not 14th century. So he wants to do expansionism. So he can move to Alaska. You know what is the difference between Alaska and the United States? So he can move to Alaska on that same excuse. So this is why the United States must be actively involved. And I think these GOP members must know what they are doing if they decide to cut the military aid or to reduce the amount or whatever to the money they are giving to Ukraine, because the thing, they will definitely come. He has already made the proverb for them in Georgia, made the proverb for them in Moldova, made the something for them in Czechia, and then also in Finland. So the United States must be involved actively, and that is why I feel that what Sergei Lavrov is saying may be correct to some extent, that this is just a kind of errand war or a proxy war, if you want to take that position.
And we thank you, Dr. Dapwa Thomas, for your contribution this morning as well. We know that President Putin isn't someone that will listen as far as the Ukrainian war is concerned. Let's hope that there will be a situation where middle ground can be found and some sort of de-escalation will occur. Many thanks for being on the program this morning, Dr. Dapwa Thomas, the expert on international relations theory and founding member of AFRPN, who joined us from Lagos.
Yeah, thank you, Olumide, for having me.
When we return, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un concludes visit to Russia as he receives gift items from his host. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome to the final stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now we understand that Russia's central bank is raising the interest rates again. To give us more information is Ini John Mekwa, Channel Television business correspondent, who joins us this morning. Ini, good morning.
Good morning. Happy Monday to you.
You as well. So they're raising the interest rates again.
Yeah, and this is the third time in 2 months. Obviously, a desperate measure that we see there from Russia. Of course, this will make borrowing more expensive. And so many factors feeding into this. Of course, inflation is going up. The ruble, we saw the ruble, I think, late last week, going more than $100. Remember, the last time we talked about it was about 60, then it went to 90, and then it's now went to more than $100 for 1 ruble. That means the ruble is really losing its value. And there's so many things feeding into it. Normally, when you see that unemployment is low in a country is supposed to be happy. But in the case of Russia, it's not like that, because what it means is that there is no labor. The people who are supposed to do the job have either been conscripted into the war or have left the country. In fact, the report says that a whole lot of them have gone to neighboring countries. So that means there's no labor for productivity. And when there's no productivity, obviously the little production that's available will now be very expensive, because when demand surpasses supply, then price will normally just go up. So even though the government of Russia they're giving positive numbers about their economic growth. In fact, they expect that this year that the economy, and this year is almost at the end, will grow at about 2.8% and on all of that. But obviously, the sanctions are biting in. There's more imports coming in now compared to export. Their oil revenue has dropped by about 40 to 45%, and that's a major one for the country. And then some of those non-oil production has really dwindled because there are no people to do it. So I mean, we don't need to ask now. We can see that by this, that the sanctions are really biting in. They might be biting in slowly, but now they're beginning to catch up with the economy, the Russian economy, and they're looking for ways to do it. I mean,
is there any danger yet, of a recession? Any danger yet? Or it's still too early for that to happen?
Well, we may not be talking of danger of recession now, because we measure recession by numbers to negative GDP growth. Who gives you that number? It's the same government that's telling us, that's giving us positive sentiment about the growth of the GDP. So I think what people outside are doing now is to look at the details of it. So the numbers coming out from Russia might be saying something else, but what's really happening there? Where are the people? Was the productivity? The other time we talked about the fuel shortage in the eastern part of Russia that mostly does the agricultural production. So those are some of the details that are being measured, but there hasn't been any talk of recession now from Russia, even though we see that the economy is being hit by the sanctions.
Very quickly, not a good time to be driving a Russian-registered car
at all
in Poland.
Yes, there's Poland, there's Finland, and then there's the other Baltic countries. That's about 5 of them. So they say even if the driver of the vehicle is Finnish or from any of the EU countries, as long as the vehicle is, remember they had done this to trucks. We talked about it.
So just impound the vehicle, right?
Yeah. So if it's registered in Russia, it can't go through their borders. And Poland has very close land border with Russia. So, I mean, it's blocking a major movement path for the Russians in this area.
That's the way the dominoes keep falling.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Ini
Thank you for having me.
Finally, on the program, as the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un concludes his visit to Russia on Sunday, he didn't leave empty-handed. His hosts gave out gifts including a fur hat, body armor, and military drones, which on their own are a violation of UN sanctions. Mr. Kim received a fur hat from Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in Vladivostok, where he inspected Russian nuclear bombers, fighter jets equipped with hypersonic missiles, and a warship. Oleg Kozemyako, the governor of the Primorsky region, presented Mr. Kim with a set of modern lightweight body armor designed for assault operations. The North Korean leader was also presented with a 5 one-way attack drone and a uranium-25 reconnaissance drone, which is widely used in the war in Ukraine, violating at least 2 UN Security Council resolutions against the North, which Moscow voted to approve, imposed for its banned missile and nuclear activities. And that's it for today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Thank you for watching. Have a good day and a great week.